Please welcome Candace Hansen, Martine Sorrondeguy, Kathleen Hanna, LaBruce, and James Spooner.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Oh my God, they made it. Every show I play, I'm like, no one's coming. And then that doesn't happen, thank God. Thank you all so much for being here. And thank you so much to our panelists for joining us and USC for hosting this incredible event. We only have about 75 minutes. There's no way we're gonna get to everything in punk history, but we are gonna get into a lot. Just to start, can everybody just yell out something from punk history that's inspired you? Just everyone in the crowd, let me just hear a big yell. What inspired you? Hell yeah. That's what I'm talking about, baby. Exactly. Well, thank you all so much, and I'm really excited. After the panel, we're gonna have a reception. So if there's stuff you wanna talk to us about, please take it out there. We're gonna be so stoked to talk to you guys. So today we're here to talk to and learn from some incredible artists who have been leaders in creating and sustaining punk movements, which is kind of the theme of our panel tonight, which we're kind of using as a word to describe the ways that people and subcultures have used punk as a tool to create movements that were much bigger than music alone, right? And have seriously impacted people and culture. Have any of you guys here today been impacted by a punk movement that one of these people helped put together? Yeah, I certainly have too. So I'd love to open this up by having everybody just share like a story or a memory from your life that you feel like really encapsulates the movement, or it could be a couple stories, the movement or movements that you were a part of. So we can just go down the line. We'll start with Martine.
All right, hola Los Ángeles, ¿cómo estamos? Hey, so when there wasn't one particular thing. I think it's always a series of things that kind of guide us or guide me. Things started early on at home that, my mom was huge in my life. She instilled a really strong politic in our household, and it informed a lot of sort of my formation as I was growing up. And then there were things that happened in punk that I think, even as a young kid, I remember watching ERG, the Music Wars, Rock Wars, and there was this band. I'd never heard of them, but the singer had black leather pants that were falling off, it felt like. He had the microphone in his mouth and his eyes were rolled back. It was the Cramps. And I remember being in the safety of my home and feeling really scared watching it, because I was still in grammar school and I was like, what am I watching? It was probably 2 in. Mom and dad are asleep, and I was like, I don't know what this is, But it was one of those moments that I felt, kind of started pushing me into this, interest in punk, along with my cousins who were in New York. They loved the Ramones. They had ticket stubs, and I was there as a kid in 1979 and hearing that stuff when I was really, really young. I was a little Kiss freak, and then all this other stuff started coming to me. So you're gonna have to cut me off because I'll just keep talking. So go ahead, Kathleen.
I come from a dysfunctional family, and I kind of felt like really happy when I left when I was 17. And I think I came to punk looking for family and community, and I wanted a big extended family. And then when I was disappointed by a lot of the racism and sexism and homophobia that I found there, I was lucky enough to be in a group of people who were like, well, let's change it. And like a lot of friends were just like, well, what can we do? And so a lot of us started punk bands, or like I started doing zines and I put on shows and I did a lot of behind the scenes stuff because I was still, in the 90s, it was still like really weird to be a woman in a band, much less one who was like, espousing like feminist politics or whatever. But I think when you were talking about seeing the Cramps in the privacy of your own home, it reminded me of, I lived in this duplex in Bellevue, Washington, and I worked at a pizza restaurant when I was living with my dad, and it was like not a great time. And I remember watching Liquid Sky late at night. I don't know if any of y'all have seen that movie, but it's like, it was the first time I saw women getting it on. And I was like, wait, what? And also, it was like, they're so fashionable, and they were into like punk and new wave, and I was like, that exists? Like, it was so far out of my idea that could exist, and I just had that as sort of like, it was like a location on the horizon that I someday wanted to visit and be a part of.
I was I was I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, so I was a virgin, ginger virgin schoolboy, and who grew up on a farm and a rural high school, and I couldn't come out. I didn't come out until well after, till I went to university. So I went to Toronto to go to York University to study film. And, I had an amazing professor, Robin Wood, who's like a Marxist feminist, like favorite critic of Truffaut and Scorsese. And he wrote a famous article called "The Responsibility of the Gay Film Critic," that kind of, where he came out. He was older, and had a family, and he came out and left, left his family and got a boyfriend and started like getting into hedonistic gay sex and like in his 40s or 50s, and he was a big influence. But then I worked at this Just Desserts, this crazy dessert restaurant in Toronto that was open 24 hours, and to put ourselves through school, and the owner was an ex-hippie, and he only hired like junkies and artists and punk musicians, and so that's where I met Fifth Column, this amazing all-female punk band in Toronto in the 80s, and like all the film students that I went to York with worked at the same restaurant, and that became kind of ground zero for just this hotbed of burgeoning like punks and artists and musicians and every member of Fifth Column worked at the restaurant, and I ended up moving in with them in like a really bad neighborhood in Toronto in basically a squat, and my friend Candy, who started one of the first queer punk fanzines, Dr. Smith worked there, and GB Jones had one of the first punk fanzines called Hide, and she worked there, and the people that ended up being on the cover of all our fanzines, JDs, like David and Sue, were on the cover stars of our fanzines. So it was just this kind of hotbed of creativity, and it was a bourgeois restaurant as well. So a part of our job was to really be mean to the clientele, who it was like a 24-hour restaurant, and they'd come in late at night for their cake, and they would be drunk in their fur coats and everything. And there's one of our friends who worked there. Her name was Linda, and I'll end with this story. She was with she was famous for being a part of the Kentucky Fried Five. There was 5 anarchists, vegan anarchists, who tried to blow up a Kentucky Fried Chicken in Vancouver. Linda was gorgeous. She was the most beautiful girl. She had white girl with long dreads, and she was hardcore. And so we were serving, we were really contemptuous of the clientele, and they'd be like coming in to get takeout of, like, it was all cake. And they'd be lining up to get their cake, And we'd watch Linda, and she'd go over with a lit cigarette and stand there, and she'd burn holes in the fur coats of the women waiting to get their cake. And we'd be like laughing our heads off, and and pointing at her, and so that was the atmosphere that we were. And my friend Candy used to play this song by Butthole Surfers, "Cunts." You know that song, "Cunts, Cunts, Cunts." it's like at the restaurant just to like comment on the clientele. So that was the genesis of my sort of queercore experience.
So I'm like a punk generation younger than the two at the end, and I grew up going to your shows, and like I was saying earlier backstage, like I was really influenced by what I was seeing, like the identity that was being forged with Riot Grrrl, and the presence of being at a Crudos show in like rural Pennsylvania with like a bunch of white kids who don't speak Spanish, and you singing in Spanish and just forcing us to like read the lyric sheet and deal, and I remember being like empowered through that, and when I to answer the question about like a story related to Afropunk. When I was making the documentary, I came across somebody who would become a protagonist, Maurice Mitchell. He was in a band called Cypher, and it instantly hit because he's like very political, singing about things like the Middle Passage and slavery, as the only black person in the room, and he might as well have been singing in Spanish, because. You can see it in the movie at one point, probably one of the more powerful scenes is him performing this at a bowling alley to a bunch of like screaming white kids who are like screaming like, lie to their children while we all rape them, which is like one of the lyrics, right? And it's just like when you see it, it's like, whoa, right? And then I asked all the kids who were singing along, like, what does he mean? And like, they didn't know. Right? To juxtapose that, like, a couple years later when the film came out and I started screening it and the Afropunk community started to play, it was like a beautiful moment when I saw, Cypher performed a show with Dead Prez at Yale, and I went up with them, and it was, basically the black Yaleys were all there, and it was like, just the scene of Cypher performing, and there was an all-black girl mosh pit, And it was like, we were both just like, this has literally never happened in the history of the world, Like, this is amazing, So to kind of have that full circle moment, both for him and with him, is, it's like one of the many blessings of, being there at the beginning of something,
That's so beautiful. Yes, give him a hand. Thank you.
Also, if I can, because I love these first time seeing punk. I mentioned this in my book, The High Desert. The first time I heard punk, I was in 5th grade at summer camp, and we had a camp counselor named Spud, and he would wake us up every morning with suicidal tendencies. And we were just like, your mommy's dead! Like,
I'm not crazy.
Yeah. It took a while it took a few more years before I could appreciate.
There is like such a link between punk and summer camp culture. Like, that's like a Venn diagram, like after I've retired from rock camp, that I'm like, I just see it. I see it everywhere. But I love what you said about the beauty of being a part of something from the beginning and then getting to actually kind of see the journey of someone and see how it's reflected in something bigger. So I'm curious if everyone on the panel has other experiences that you've had, like with the movements you were a part of, where you kind of saw something like James did, where you saw like a journey for somebody that the movement that you were a part of like really impacted someone or something.
Are we going in order still?
We can. Yeah, let's do it. It's punk. We can go in any order we want. But let's go in order.
Except counterclockwise. Except counterclockwise.
I think for me, it was the moment that people started learning the lyrics and singing along with us, like in our neighborhood. And I just felt like there was a new connection happening, during the Crudos era of, other young Latino kids, Chicano kids, like just identifying with what we were doing and what we were saying and being like, fuck yeah. I had a kid come to me, goes, my grandfather loves your lyrics but hates your music. And I was like, I'm okay with that. Like, if he can get down with the lyrics, I'm okay with that, But stuff like that was happening, and it was kind of tripping us out a little bit because we really thought it was just a neighborhood project. That's what we thought. I didn't know what was going to happen, and then all of a sudden, after our first record got reviewed in Maximum Rock and Roll, it was like I started getting letters. I got a letter from Russia, and I was like, what? It just started to I don't know, something started happening, and it just kind of just blew out of that. And
What about the English-speaking Los Crudos from Spain?
yeah, I don't even know about that.
You don't even know about that?
But it was one of those things. I think we did our first U.S. tour, and it was linked. We would go on these 3-month tours. So when we went to other cities like L.A. or we were in New York, it was like kids were connecting with us, and we felt like, even in San Antonio and other parts, like we were connecting because we felt like we grew up with them. We're like, we're from like the same kind of world. It's crazy. But then it really hit when we went into Mexico and started doing this tour of Mexico. And it was like another level. And when we went to South America, it was like, I don't know, something else happened. There was something that, I don't know, I just felt like this isn't ours anymore. And I felt like, and I've always said, Crudos songs, even though we wrote them, they were no longer ours, they were everybody's, and they were the people. So I still feel that way.
How do I follow that? So beautiful. I think the time where I felt like I had, even though I had nothing to do with starting rock camp, like rock camp for girls, and now I think they're making it so it's like not just girls, it's like also non-binary people. And
Yes, yeah, like Chicas in Southgate or in Southeast LA is now Chiquex Rockerex. Please, if Chicas family are in the house, correct me. But yeah, a lot of the camps are organizing so that it can be more gender expansive. Yeah, and when I used to run the rock camp with Josie Reck and Jonathan Santillan, and ours was gender expansive too in Orange County. But yes, you are absolutely correct. Sorry.
yeah, so but when it was like probably 2000, 2001, and I got to visit the rock camp in Brooklyn, Willie Mae Rock Camp, and I had to just hold back tears the whole entire time, because when me and my friend Toby and Kathy started Bikini Kill, we were like, we want to see more girls on stage. We want to see more, we want to hear more. We don't want it just to be us. And there were a lot of women always who made punk music, who made music in general, who were erased and stuff like that. And we were like, we want to make a scene where we can talk about the stuff the issues that we're having, because also we were having shit where, and I'm sure everybody has had shitty experiences where it's like people wouldn't plug in my monitor unless I told them if I was single or married, or
Okay, but what clubs?
that
we
was
need
in
a
York,
list.
Pennsylvania. No, but it was just like this thing where we're like, oh, it would be so awesome if there was a scene that we could be a part of, where it's like at my high school, I'm kind of older, I'm 57, and at my high school there were these groups of kids, and there was psychedelic kids, there were kids who were into U2, which was considered new wave at the time, and then there were heavy metal kids and speedcore kids, and then there were, I already said the psychedelic kids, and then there were kids that were really into classic rock and the Doors and stuff like that. there was no, I had this kind of thing in my mind was I was like, oh, I wish there was a thing where it was like, all the girls who are really into like L7 are hanging out together. You know what I mean? Like, where's that? Where's that group? Like, and so one thing is seeing that happen like at high schools and being like, oh, like somebody saying, I met my best friend because, you know, she made me a Bratmobile tape, and then I was like, got really into Bratmobile, and then we're friends, and then we started a band. Like all of those stories. But the thing that really hit me was Rock Camp for Girls, because I had nothing to fucking do with it, and it happened, and all these people put so much work in, and then I got to walk in and enjoy it. Like I got to walk in and be a benefit of the groundwork that they laid all around the country and all around the world to do the thing that we had kind of half-assed pathetically tried to do, and they actually did it. And that to me was like seeing my band's dream come true in real life. And I've gotten to teach there, and I was a band coach for a band. And that's always just like the most fulfilling full circle moment for me.
That's so beautiful to hear you say, because I was a big part of the rock camp movement internationally for years. And what I always loved, and I started at the Portland Rock Camp. I had an adjunct professor at Santa Ana College who paid for me to fly to volunteer at the Portland Rock Camp because I had left a band with a man who was abusive to me. And she wanted me to find community. She was incredible. Her name is Julie Davis. She still teaches in community colleges. But I went to that Portland Rock Camp, and it changed my whole life. And I remember they had a painting of you. Did you get to see the painting? So that must have came after you were there. This was in 2009. They had like a Riot Grrrl Hall of Fame, and it was so beautiful. And at all the camps, everybody plays Rebel Girl. And it's kind of like the way that if you're at school, you have to pledge allegiance to the flag. It's like, at rock camp, you kind of get up, you kind of get your coffee, you stretch, and then Rebel Girl's on, and you're just fucking in it, bitch. Like, it's go time, you know? So, I mean, it's beautiful to hear that reflection as someone who was a part of that movement, so thank you for sharing that. Bruce, are there any experiences that you feel like in your life with queercore, with filmmaking, that you saw like a journey of somebody come to fruition because of the movement you were a part of?
Well, I mean, for us, it started as homocore, and then queercore came later. But it was all about alienation from the middle-class gay white movement. You know, that was the whole thing. So this was in the 80s, the early mid 80s, and we just didn't feel represented. We didn't feel like we had a community, and so that's when Caroline from Fifth Column we basically hijacked a lesbian bar in the gay ghetto. And she started like having her friends perform there and DJ there, and we were playing our own music and punk music. And you know, the owner was getting nervous, and he was saying like, "This is like you're turning this into Mohawk Palace," and you know, they're very suspicious of what we were doing, and they didn't get it, but they kind of tolerated us. So you know, we were being tolerated within the gay community, you know, and. But it was a very bourgeois, middle-class, racist, kind of misogynist movement at that point, and we wanted to be all-inclusive and you know, racially and class and in all ways. And so we started the fanzine JDs, which was to kind of it was basically trying to create a kind of a longing for a community that we thought was ideal, that we really wanted to live, you know. So we just started like. Making up this movement and kind of pretending it was a full-fledged movement, which I know Kathleen did kind of the same thing, and pretended everyone thought that Toronto was this hotbed of like punks, like queer punks fucking each other and like, you know, and dykes and like just being really revolutionary and on the streets and, you know, taking over the street. And basically it was just me and like 3 girls, you know, staying up after working at the dessert restaurant all night and being bored and like doing cut and paste and doing our fanzines and so it was like we created, you know, just out of pure kind of desire and kind of longing for something that didn't exist, you know, to make it up out of nothing, you know, and so it kind of I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it, but I mean, it was, you have to understand, like, it was pre-internet, it was pre-social media, and we used the mail. And so we just started mailing out our little fanzines, because there was all the major big punk straight fanzines like Fact Sheet 5 and Maximum Rock and Roll and Flip Side and Forced Exposure and whatever, and they'd have ads in the back. And so we'd put ads for our fanzines, and we'd mail them to get reviewed in these, and then eventually it was insane, because you would have to, you'd correspond with people. Then you found out there's other people like you in other cities that are going through the exact same experience, that are alienated from the mainstream gay world, and they don't have a sense of community, and they're lonely, but you'd have to wait for 2 weeks to get a response from your heartfelt letter, and we'd exchange like photographs with each other. Like it was very naive, charmingly, like it seems so charmingly naive and kind of sincere and idealistic at this point. But when that started to take off, and like you said, we started getting letters from Europe and Soviet, like from Russia and from all over South America, like just all over the world, and realizing that there is a whole kind of like community out there. It became like then that really spurred us on to like to make it into something that wasn't just a fantasy,
I love that, because it's also part of queer history. I don't know if you know this, but like, the Dyke, the novels, like the little shitty novels, they did the same thing with Greenwich Village. One of the women who used to write the novels used to pretend like there was this big Dyke community in Greenwich Village, and there fucking wasn't. It was like just her. And then because of the books, all these dykes would go to Greenwich Village. So this is part of our history, to lie, for the greater good. So
we're fabulists. we're real fabulists. We know how to.
Yes. James, do you have any memories besides what you shared already, about like seeing like Afropunk's impact?
Well, so it's important to understand like the long bow of history with Afropunk. And it started off as this DIY film and this small community of people who were coming to see it, and I was like putting on these shows, and it was 200 people, and I could name them, right? Through a long course of events that I won't get into now, if you're familiar with Afropunk now, it's a global brand, and the concerts are like Erykah Badu, and 100,000 people are there or whatever, right?
You had a Gucci line though, an Afropunk Gucci line. Because there was a queercore Gucci line of shoes. They called them queercore.
Oh, there was an Afropunk Converse at one point, but
oh, there you go.
But I mean, the influence of Afropunk on the mainstream is a whole other conversation. I mean, there's a Black Spider-Man because of Afropunk, But like, that's not the part to be proud of. The part that's exciting is that at a certain point, I realized that punks work best when they're reacting. And probably every one of these movements is a reaction to the like whack shit of like white heteronormative whatever that punk sometimes can be. And in this case, at the full circle moment was when I left Afropunk in 2008 when it started to become corporate, and shortly after, little scenes started to pop up. Kids were like, that's not punk, and they were starting their own thing, right? And by 2015, there were all of these autonomous black and brown punk festivals happening all over the country, and I would start writing them and saying like, I really love what you guys are doing, whatever, and they, across the board, were like, yeah, we saw what you were doing and that was awesome, but we hate what they're doing, so we're like, fuck that, and now we're doing our own thing. So it's this beautiful moment when you can look back and be like, okay, through all my pain of watching my baby like turned into this like corporate monster, I actually got what I wanted tenfold, because now there are more Black and brown punk festivals than I can count, and more happening all the time. And some of them are even like grandbabies, because they're like, the Houston Black and Brown Festival is an offshoot of the San Antonio one, So that's the thing, is like, if you can ride it out, you get to see your thing like actually materialize in the best way, which in my opinion is in the underground.
Totally. The thing that is like so like beautiful but also rough about what you're sharing is it's like the people who put in the work to make these things happen because they want to see a change in the world are not the ones who ever financially benefit from the success of them. But it's like more rewarding, I think, to see people feel a sense of liberation and joy through sound than it is to have a Gucci bag. Although I do love a nice bag. But I was just also wanted to ask you all, so can you each talk a little bit about the context which created the movements you were a part of? So I know for Martine, you were a part of like the international kind of Latino hardcore like movement, but also of queercore. But can you talk to us a little bit about the context that created Los Crudos and the scene that you guys were a part of? Because something that I think is really like important about all of your guys' work is what you did came from necessity, right? Like there was a reason why you guys started making the art that you did and making the communities that you did that was inspired not just by, oh, I want to make a cool rock band, or a cute little movie. It's like urgent, So would love to hear from everybody about the contexts that created the movements that you helped create.
Also, if I can,
Yes.
We can't underestimate Limp's impact, because I was a fan of a lot of queer punk bands, but I never saw a punk band like Limprist, at least playing to this like largely straight audience who had to like deal with it because you guys are so fucking good, And I think that like is a way to bring people over,
Okay. Okay, so I'll just start with Crudos, since that came first. Crudos, to be honest, was very heavy. It was a heavy band for me. But it was necessary that Crudos happened. So my family, we migrated from Uruguay to Chicago. We were raised in the Pilsen neighborhood in Chicago. And at the time, when I was very young, I didn't speak English. I was learning English. We were taught, there were me and a few other Latino kids, and we were taught really early that we weren't supposed to speak Spanish anymore. And that kind of growing up with that, or being used to translate to other Raza kids or Latino kids and telling them, the nuns would use me to translate and say, you can't speak Spanish anymore. And it was really just ugly, And my mom, I have to just keep going back to her because she was such a powerful woman. She took no shit. She studied medicine in Uruguay. We left Uruguay because there was a dictatorship and we had to go. My mom's nickname was Pati la Socialista. And in a dictatorship, you can't be nicknamed Socialista nothing. So, when I went back to Uruguay, my tias, my aunts were like, we were happy you left, you needed to leave. And coming up and in that, Crudos had to happen for me. When I found punk and I found that there was this movement of, you just make shit happen, you have to do it. It doesn't matter if you know how to do it, you'll figure it out. And I already, was in this punk world and I was going, wow, nobody's singing about our neighborhood and what's happening and what the experiences we had. And that was it. I found the other members and I was like, I have this idea, we're going to do this band, but it's going to be in Spanish. Are you cool with it? And it was kind of like, everybody got on board and we did it. And yes, it was absolutely necessary. And, you know, we faced a lot of backlash, even within community people, that you would be surprised, but we found that. But we got to tell our story as immigrants and as, you know, coming from another place, speaking different languages, being culturally different. And then that fed me to a certain point. But I'm also a big fag. So I was like, at some point, you know, I started writing songs in Crudos on the Canciones LP that were addressing queerness, you know? But when Crudos was coming to an end for a while and taking that pause, I remember meeting these other punk fags. And I was like, we should do a band, you know? And we came together and formed Limp. So I was jumping on a Greyhound bus and going to Philly, and we were practicing and writing songs in Philly, and Limp happened, and it was our time to take especially the straight edge and hardcore dude scene and just flip it on his fucking head. And that's what we did with Limp. So we liked fast, aggressive music. We liked playing it. And I don't know, it just worked for us. So, yeah.
I want to ask you a follow-up question before we move too far, is about just your approach to being a front man, because I think it's so fucking powerful that you use these aesthetics that, like, traditionally in hardcore, a lot of the guys that suck are in that scene. And you are taking the same aesthetics that pushed out people of color, queer people, you know, from the Los Angeles scene, women, and you're making them so full of love and so full of rage at the same time, but love rage, you know what I mean? And you're making, through that aesthetic, space for queer people and people of color. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about your approach to being a front man, like any inspirations you had or how you kind of think about taking up space as a singer in hardcore.
It's, you know, my thing is just, it's ours. Punk is ours, you know, and that was my sort of mentality, is like, I do not have to ask for permission to be here and to do what we're doing. And that was with all my bands, you know. I remember once we played a festival. There were always festivals in the 90s. And it was in Ohio. And these kids who organized it came up to me. They're like, Martine, we have a safe space for queer people and people of color here at the show. I was like, wow, what? And I was like, what is it? Let me see. And they took me out of the venue down some long hallway in some room. And I was like, fuck this. I said, I'm gonna be back over there. If people can't deal with me, that's tough shit, you know? And I went back in the venue. I was like, no, I don't need that. I don't want it. And I never asked for permission. We do what we do. And I think everyone should do that. Just do what you do, you know?
Kathleen, what were the conditions and the context that helped you create Riot Grrrl?
Well, Riot Grrrl was created by a whole bunch of people that was not me. Like, I was really very minimally involved. Like, I called the first meeting with Allison Wolf, who was DJing earlier, and then it just sort of grew into its own thing. So I can't really take credit as being like co-founder, except for that, like, I got up with a clipboard at a punk show and said, hey, meet us in the back and we'll get your phone numbers and we'll call you for this meeting that I thought was going to be about running a magazine about women in music. And nobody wanted that, except me. Then I started going on tour and I got kind of like punk famous. And it was really hard for me to be in a group when I was like 25 or 26 and all the kids in Riot Grrrl were like 18, 19, 20. And they looked at me like I was a big ass deal and I knew everything, and it was like I couldn't take the pressure, to be perfectly honest. So it's kind of a misnomer that I was like the leader or whatever. It was really, you know, you, GB, Carolyn, like the whole scene that was going on in Toronto was hugely, hugely important to us. Donna Dresch, who some of you know from Team Dresch, Donna, bass player, she played with the Screaming Trees. Like the whole town drove to Seattle to see when Donna played with the Screaming Trees. It was really exciting. And Donna was on the cover of Homocore. And we started reading in Olympia, getting these Homocore zines, and also Double Bill, which is a really hilarious zine by G.B. Jones from Fifth Column. And she's an amazing filmmaker, changed my life. So funny. The thing that really, really influenced me was the fact that I didn't have to, there's this whole, fucked up stereotype of like, if you're political at all, or if you're a feminist or whatever, that you don't have any sense of humor. These people on this panel are some of the funniest motherfuckers I have ever fucking met in my life. So like, I was really interested in more being like, a crazy pirate, like Kathy Acker talked about, and not being like, getting up, like I didn't need to tell people what to do. I didn't want to be a teacher or a cop. I wanted to be in a fucking band. I wanted to be a cool girl in a fucking band that was singing about the things that were important to me. And I really related what you were saying of like, I was going to this small liberal arts college in a small town, and it was like all my friends, everybody, we'd all been fucking date raped. We were all getting harassed just trying to go to the bank. Like, it was scary to just walk anywhere. Like, we were literally living in fear. And it was like, I was setting up shows at the time. I was like booking shows, and these guys were fucking showing up and singing about what bitches their girlfriends were. And I was like, I do not relate to this, and I'm not gonna do it. And then this band, also from Canada, what is it up with Canada? Mecca Normal came and played, and they were outwardly political. And I was like, that's what I want. I can mix politics with art. I can mix humor. I don't have to choose one lane. And I think that was one of the sad things for me about Bikini Kill, is that people didn't realize how funny we were. Like, I thought a lot of the songs were really hilarious. And I thought, like, when I would be in a record store singing in some white dude's face with a mohawk, about like rape right into his face, or like singing "White Boy, Don't Laugh, Don't Cry, Just Die." I thought that was so funny, and
Suck My Left One?
Left One, come on, it's hilarious. Like singing about the carnival, like that you can do feminism in a million different fucking ways, and you don't have to do it in one way. And like, while some of our lyrics were very didactic, I felt like, I could do anything because my two friends were like giving me the push forward that they wanted the same thing. And because I met Toby Vale, who wrote a fanzine called Jigsaw, and she wrote about feminism and punk at the same time, and I'd never ever seen that. And then when I started reading G.B. Jones zines, I was like, oh my God, this is sexy, this is funny. She had this thing that was Double Bill about William Burroughs and William Conrad, the actor, if any of you are old enough to remember him. Cannon. He played Cannon, the detective on TV, and it was sort of a compare and contrast. But one of the things that I didn't know until I read that zine was that William Burroughs shot his wife, Joan, with a gun and killed her, and got away with it.
William Tell.
Well, he said he was playing William Tell. I've been the drunk girl at the party who probably would have put the apple on my head. So when I heard that, and that she was like saying, fuck this, all the dudes at my school, all the dudes in my town walking around with their William Burroughs books, and looking at it and started thinking about it in a new way, where I was like, how come he gets away with that? And he's like the king of the writing of punk scene. And then luckily we got Kathy Acker handed to us by the universe, and I was able to have her, but I'm going off too much. I'll let Bruce talk.
No, you're good. Because I also wanted to hear about like the electro clash scene too. I feel like that doesn't really get as much like airtime as Riot Grrrl, and you were, Tigre was instrumental in that. And I thought like, yeah. I mean, just like the songs that you guys wrote as a millennial who was like taking the bus to downtown LA to like protest the Iraq war and then working my shitty job at Domino's Pizza, you know, and just crying all the time because I didn't know what to do, and just like listening to your songs, I think for so many of us who are of my generation, made us feel like there is this place for us to have joy amidst all this fucked up shit that we cannot fucking escape, you know? And I feel like that's so powerful. And I'm just curious, like, if you could talk a little bit about like what it was like being in Le Tigre and how you all were picking up on those Riot Grrrl ethos, like for the millennium.
Whoa, I don't know what to say to that. That was a big mouthful. You know, I was just in a band, and then I wasn't in a band, and I was really depressed. And I'd been doing this kind of stuff with, it basically, that whole record and that band started because my band didn't want to practice. And you know how, like, I was talking about this earlier to my friends that, like, for me, I don't sit around and eat Triscuits. Triscuits are like a vehicle for another food, such as like, you know, like pizza sauce and then like some cheese and then like a olive on it.
And when you put them in the oven and
yeah, Triscuit pizza.
Melt the cheese.
Triscuit pizza.
It's really good.
When things go wrong, I always make Triscuit pizza. But to me, it's like a vehicle for hummus or it's a vehicle for some other thing. I'm not just going to sit around eating fucking Triscuits. But so for me, like getting a drum machine and starting to fuck around with the sampler was like just a vehicle so that I could sing. Because I had all these singing ideas that I wasn't able to do in my band because they were like, wouldn't come over to my apartment. No, because we were like all having like all of these weird experiences, and like we had lost a lot of people to like AIDS and drugs and suicide, and so we were having our own like depressions in our apartments and not talking about it. We did not know how to fucking communicate or have a fight. And like going to rock camp, and when I'm sorry, I'm being like all tangent-y, but when me and my friend Sarah coached this band, and I got to see them, they were 11 to 17-year-olds, have their first band fight. And I was like, this is glorious. Because I didn't know how to fight. Like, I mean, I know how to fight, but I didn't know how to have a fight about music and about what direction we were gonna go and what the song sounded like or how many times we were gonna practice, or we didn't have those fights, and then it boiled up and it created a really bad situation where we weren't talking to each other. And so I just started doing electronic music so that I could make a bed for me to sing on top of. It was really just like that. And I luckily lived in a town like Olympia where it literally was the place where people were like, hey, let's put on a punk show in the laundromat. Like, everybody was always like trying to make things happen. And like that, I love to tell people that, because if you can find a group of people who are like supportive and will like loan you stuff, if you want to learn how to do Pro Tools, they'll show you or whatever, and really foster that group, you can make so much stuff happen. And I'd never been in that situation until I moved to Olympia, and there was a record label there, K, that was like, you know, doing a different kind of punk that wasn't so macho. And it said everybody could do it. And because I was in that permissive environment, when I switched over to electronic music, it was like totally like fine. Like the guy from Negative Land brought like 10 mics over to my house. You know, and I didn't even know him. Like everybody wanted to help, and it was really, really, I was really, really lucky. And then I moved to New York and worked with my friend Johanna, and then it was just like one of those things where you're making something and you're so excited and you can't stop. But I thought that record was gonna, like, people were gonna hate it. The first Tigre record, and like, Decepticon was a throwaway song that I wrote in a day. And so to see now what the fuck has happened with that song is so weird. It's like you don't even know. It's sort of like, you know, going to a casino and like putting money into the thing. It's like some weird gamble. I was like gambling without knowing it. And we had like kind of a second life as a band because of TikTok and, you know, that song. So.
Can I ask a question? No. I want to know about, I have to ask you about what's your take on Cassavetes, because when I was in when I was in university, I had I lived on campus for 1 year, and I had this friend next door, like a neighbor, who was a really hardcore feminist, but she was pretty politically correct. And I made the enormous mistake of taking her to go see Cassavetes' Killing of a Chinese Bookie, which is like really, it's set in a strip club, and it's like very seedy, and the women are. I don't think it's an anti-feminist movie at all, but of course, she actually, after the screening was over, she was white, and she never spoke to me again. Like, that was the end of our friendship. And then that.
But we're here now.
Yeah. But I'm just wondering, what's the genesis of that song? Were you literally sitting around in the van, like when you're, on tour, going, what's your take on Cassavetes? Like, is that where it came from, or what? Because it really does nail this, genius, misogynist, alcoholic, Messiah. Like, he really did nail that kind of like essential debate,
I think we were trying to ask a question and not give an answer. I love Cassavetes personally. Like, I love a lot of his films, and I love Gina Rollins, and I love the work that she did in those films. I think is totally genius. And Sadie Benning, who is an original member of Le Tigre, and I were actually on a total Cassavetes binge, and we were going to see his films whenever they were like being shown on a screen. And so we were talking about like, what about the misogyny? And we're like, well, we like really like this. And so like, it's not that we don't care about the misogyny. It was sort of like, everybody was asking those questions, as people still are asking those questions of like, is it okay if I like Louis C.K.? I mean, for me, gross. But you know what I mean? I think that, we have to make those decisions in our everyday life, and there's just some, for me, it's just where it's like my stomach hurts and I can't. And then there's some artists who it's like, I can be like, that was a complicated situation, and like, I'm a smart enough reader that I'm not gonna like turn bad because that person did something bad. Like, I think that we're all smart enough readers that it doesn't mean if we like somebody who's super problematic that we're gonna turn into whatever, or we're stamping of approval or whatever. I hate that thing where it's like if you stand next to somebody, you are that person, or you know what I mean? But we were just asking the question. I think in all my bands, I've tried to ask questions, and the thing that's been really hard is that I think if you're progressive in your politics, people want to put you into a brand, and they want you to stay the same way, and they want to say, oh, they're these preachy fucking bitches who are saying X, Y, and Z. And I think if you actually look at my output as a musician, it's like, it was a lot of questions and a lot of humor. Not to pat myself on the back.
So Bruce, what was the context in which y'all kind of created homocore together? Like, we were talking a little bit backstage that I was like, I don't know a lot about Toronto queer history. So I'm curious if you could kind of explain the context, and then also the context of your filmmaking too.
Well, I mean, one thing that kind of was maybe unique about JD's and our conception of homocore was the porn angle. We really leaned hard into the explicit sex, right? So what it was about was we rejected, as I was saying, like the mainstream gay, middle-class gay white movement, and we discovered punk, and we were like, oh my God, this is so exciting. It's like aesthetically, politically, it's anarchistic, it's anti-corporate, it's anti-capitalist, it's like it was at the time of the gay clones who were all wearing the same, like, white shirt and jeans and sneakers and one earring, and they were totally conformist. And we thought, oh, this is an amazing new scene. And then once we started going into the scene and going to shows and trying to distribute our fanzines and stuff, they were the same. It was basically white guys who were straight, and they were misogynist, and they had their girlfriends, the coat racks, like holding their coats like on the outside of the pit while they were dancing, and they were racist, some of them. I mean, even some of the left-wing ones, and so we were like so disillusioned. We were like, oh my God, we just left one subculture and then go to another one, and it has almost all the same problems plus homophobia on top of it, And so, homophobia is the one thing that, unites everyone. I mean, it unites people on the left, on the right, on all races. You know, it's like that's one thing everyone can agree on. And so, so our reaction to that was, and you were saying, Martin, that it's very like reactive, like, you know, punk, and so that really pissed us off. And we were trying to figure out, okay, what could we do to enrage these guys, you know, these like straight punks, and so we started putting gay porn in our films, and like we'd find Super 8 gay porn like in a bargain bin somewhere in a bookstore, and we'd splice it into our movies. So one of my early films was a short film called Slam, and it's basically, I went to a hardcore show in Toronto. It was Scream, the Mr. T Experience, and Millions of Dead Cops, and yeah, legendary show, and I already knew Dave Dichter from MDC, and you know, so I was in the mosh pit, and I was always, you know, fascinated by how gay the mosh pit was, how homoerotic, and totally turned me on. And yet, if you said you're gay, they're like, I'm gonna fucking kill you, you know? It's like, what the fuck is that all about? They didn't even recognize that their own gayness, you know? And so I took the footage from the mosh pit and intercut it with Al Parker, who was a famous gay porn star, with a mustache and everything. And I intercut the mosh pit footage with Al Parker, and then put a Carpenter soundtrack on it. Of course. Superstar, long ago, and so far away. I fell in love with you before the second show, you know. So that basically nails the JD's kind of our homocore. That's our thesis, you know. Carpenter soundtrack, guys moshing in the pit, and gay porn, you know. So
hell yeah.
That was our formula, and so we really. You know, the very basic idea was if you radical punks who think you're so anarchist and so like, you know, anti-nonconformist, and you know, if you can't like accept a movie with two guys fucking each other up the ass, then it's bullshit. Then you're just as, you know, conformist as everyone else. You know? So
that kind of
yeah.
reminds me of, there's a scene in my forthcoming book, It Starts With Anger, that it is from when I was in high school. I grew up in New York City, and there's a famous kind of gay club, not kind of gay, there's a famous gay club called Pyramid Club.
Yeah.
That, legendary.
Yeah, that like, you know, it was like RuPaul and Lady Bunny and all those, you know, goes all the way back. And every so often they have like punk shows. And there was this one like punk party that was going on there like every Friday, and it'd be like, you know, Jimmy Gestapo from Murphy's Law was the DJ, and there's like a goth party downstairs, and it's like, you know, punk, hardcore, and, you know, like ska, you know, unite kind of thing. And I had this like vivid memory of like, you know, being 15 and going up to the bar to get a drink because it was pre-Giuliani, and like and they're just being like New York's toughest hardcore guys. Like, you know, there's Murphy's Law there, there's like Sick of It All, there's like Warzone dudes. They're all like, you know, they're all like, were you there?
Macho guys.
Yeah, they're all like sitting at the bar, like ordering drinks and stuff, and above the bar is just like the hardest core porn, like gay porn, just like anal sex, and I'm just like 15, like, like what? I'm trying like not knowing where to put their eyes, you know? So, I mean, those kind of moments, you know, they were so common in New York City because so much of the scene took place downtown that these tough guys had to contend with like queerness, but then.
But I have to say there were some guys in the hardcore scene who really got it, and they were like, yeah, that is hardcore, like gay, like ass fucking. That is hardcore. And, you know, and
yeah, they weren't all
like
dope.
Dave Dichter used to perform in a dress, like, you know, before, you know, almost anyone else, and he he was like so like adamant that of being inclusive, and he wasn't gay, but he was totally open to like androgyny, and there was you did that was the most heartening thing when you ran into guys who were totally macho and in the pit and like really like aggressive aggro, you know, it's all about aggro, and that they actually understood like how radical you know, essentially homosexuality is.
I mean, the scene that I grew up in, which I was like largely reacting to when I would go to the outer boroughs to see your bands, were it was incredibly macho, and I think it was just the moment, because it was like early '90s, so like, you know, various heydays had like come and gone, and by the time that moment was happening, it was all about these kind of like Vision of Disorder, kind of like tough guy bands, you know. That's just all it was. And I'm, you know, as much as I tried to like hold my own in the pit, it was just like, you know, that those DMS dudes, like they have got their shirts off, they're all, you know, it's just a pit full of muscles and fat, and I'm just like, I got,
Thugs, yeah.
I'm like, I couldn't make it, you know. So going to like the softer hardcore shows, like your bands, in the suburbs, where, you know, like the politics were on point, even if it wasn't always, you know.
But that moment in in the documentary is amazing. I love that moment when the singer, when you're singing and they're repeating the lyrics back to you, and that was like the essence of hardcore. They knew all the lyrics, and you put the microphone out to them, and they're singing back to you and everything. But the fact that they didn't actually
Those white kids knew how to say crudo soy. The white kids knew how to say crudo soy. Like,
but at least you were communicating on some level. I mean, on a punk level, like they were open enough to listen to you, even though they weren't quite computing the you know, profoundly what you're talking about. You know, about the history of racial oppression, whatever. At least they were open enough to, like, you know, I don't know. That's what punk, I think, was all about, was just getting everyone to a level where they were receptive and open to you know.
A lot of it, if I can, a lot of it was also, with both of your bands, was the conversations that happened that you may or may not have been privy to, because, like, you know, I was in the audience, and the conversations that were happening, like, as we were driving home and stuff, like, I have vivid memories about, you know, talking to other kids who were supposedly on point, and them saying things like, why has he got to speak in Spanish? Like, nobody here speaks Spanish. And me being, like, 17 and having to, like ask and answer that question for them, you know, and coming up with the answer, like, well, maybe he's not speaking to us, you know, like, we're here as an audience, but it's not for us, and, you know.
Or maybe I was, you know?
Well,
it's like, we are a part of the fabric of where we're at, so hearing other languages should not, you know, turn you away from it. So, you know, we were very aware that we were playing in the most rural cities. I mean, I think that was what was really unique about what we did, is we'd go on these 3-month tours, and we're playing Boise, Idaho, or these really small towns, and we're facing, you know, these kids are just staring at us like, what is happening right now? And I always love that reaction. You know, even with Limp, it's like, we played in some small town in New Zealand, and kids just stood back and were kind of scared. And my guitarist was like, Scott was like, oh, that was really weird. I said, no, that was fucking amazing, because they're never going to forget this. And you know, that's how I always felt about it. So, you know, every small town, and we would get into some shit in these small towns, you know, I mean, there were brawls that broke out in fights because people were not understanding, not wanting to understand, and just, you know, and there were a lot of amazing experiences around it as well, so.
Yeah, I mean, I had an experience like that with my film Afropunk, because the documentary there's interviews with almost 100 black punks, and people would literally ask questions like, this might be weird, but how come you didn't interview any white people? You know? And like,
White lives matter too.
and I remember specifically having this one moment where there was a guy in Houston, shout out to Rad Rich, he's an old punk rocker, black dude, and he worked for the airport, like a luggage handler. So he had flights, you know? So he like flew me out, and he you know, raised some money for me to stay in a place or whatever and show the movie. And I did this, we did this screening at a bar. It was like, you know, really good crowd. And afterwards, this like sharp skinhead girl stands up and she's like, you know, I don't know about how it is in the rest of the country, but that's not how it is here in Houston. Like, you know, like we all love Rad Rich and like that kind of thing. And I'm like, he brought me out here to talk to you, you know, to like, you know, so maybe if you hear like 100 black people telling you something is true, like maybe you stop talking and you start listening, you know? So.
James, that brings me to a question I wanted to ask you is like, why did it feel like what was your inspiration when you created Afropunk, and like, why did you feel like it was so important to do at the time you did? Because I feel like what you created had such a beautiful and huge impact. Like, I recently saw this clip from Much Music where they like had talked to you, and I don't know if you all, if any people who are younger here, but
The
like
Canadian MTV.
yeah, it was like the Canadian MTV, and so like if you had like a dish channel or something or cable, you could watch it, and they had better music than MTV did in the early 2000s. And so it was like there was this Much Music thing where they interviewed you, and then they did this whole feature on like black like musicians being the architects of punk, and it's like that would have never fucking happened, and that wouldn't have been zapped into houses in Garden Grove, California, you know, and all these places that are like not like hubs of culture particularly, right? Like, and that happened because of the film that you made, you know? So I'm curious, like, if you have anything to talk about, like, why during that early 2000s, like, did it feel like so important to tell the story that you did?
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like, you know, to this day, if I say, yeah, I made this book about black punk, or I made this movie about black punk, people are like, oh, like Bad Brains, you know? And it's like, stop and start, like, you know? And it's like, yeah, yes, but also, here's like, you know, look at the back of the Black Punk Now book, it's got like a list of like 200 bands. But for me, in the early 2000s, I was in my early 20s. I had spent, you know, I got into punk when I was 14, 13. And I had all these experiences where I felt like in order to, like, I was a scenester, you know, like I put on shows, I like, you know, did zines, I had a record label, I was heavily involved in like putting, you know, and putting the scene on, you know? But I felt like I had to sacrifice something, you know, like in order to be like the cool kid that I wanted to be, I had to like not make people uncomfortable with talk about my experience of race. And the conversations around race usually stopped and started with like, fuck Nazis, you know? And I'm like, yeah, like, yes, fuck Nazis, for sure. But that also lets everybody else off the hook, you know? And at that point, the title of my book, It Starts With Anger, it was like, that's what was happening. I was angry. And initially, I wanted to make this movie that I could show to white kids and be like, feel bad, you know? Like, you know, like, you know, the movie starts off with like a quote from Patti Smith saying like, outside of society, that's where I want to be. And it's like, you know, quote, like underline want to be, right? This is like what you want, but we have to be, right? So it started off with this anger, but then as I started doing interviews and hearing other people's stories, and you know, just it quickly turned into a celebration. It quickly, even in talking about painful things, it was like healing, you know? And then I wasn't like mad. I wasn't even thinking about the white kids anymore, you know? I just wanted to make a movie for the other, you know, like specifically the other black punks, but it became, very quickly, it became clear that this was a metaphor for so many people's experience. So, you know, I had an experience where I screened it. I got flown to some college in the Midwest, I don't remember where, small, like, liberal arts school, and there was the Chinese Christian Association brought me out to show the film because there was like 6 Chinese kids from China who like saw the movie and were like, that's us. Oh. That's how we are here, you know, like, so just that feeling and being able to give that gift, you know, I mean, it was, you know, making a movie is not a short, like, it took me 2 years, and it's like, that was therapy every day. So I was healed by the time I was sharing it, and then it just became more healing to continue having that experience, you know?
That's beautiful. So if you can take a look here, I will ask one more question, then we'll get into a little Q&A. So if any of y'all have burning questions for our beautiful and brilliant panelists, you put it in there, and then I can see it on my little phone. So if you want to submit, get into the submission fantasy now. So something that we had talked about a little bit in the preliminary talk about this panel that James, you had brought up was like how sometimes punk movements have been co-opted. And so I wanted to ask, does anybody on the panel feel like what you were a part of became co-opted in any way? Or if so, what do you do with that? If not, that's okay. But I'm just curious if anyone had that experience.
I don't think Latino punk is co-opted. I don't think queer punk is co-opted. I think there's always going to be an underground, and there will always be new blood coming into this world. And, you know, whoever wants to try to co-opt it, good luck, you know, because we read through the bullshit. Like, we see the fake shit, and we're like, that ain't it. That's just not it. And it's like, so I love when I see young kids getting into stuff, making stuff, a zine, a band, whatever. I'm like, that's where it's going. And I applaud it 100%. So, you know, go ahead and try to co-opt it. It's just not going to work. I mean, so many of us can identify as punks. You know when their shit is fake. You see it and you're like, that's not it. It's just not it. You don't feel it, so. Yeah, that's just my take.
Yeah.
Hey, can we, I would love if the house can turn on the lights. I'd love to see people. I can't see anyone. I'm kind of blinded up here, and I just love to kind of, I don't know if that's possible or not, but it would be nice.
Yeah, I would take a house light in my monitor. I would take that.
There's a lot of people here.
I know, I can't even see people. Are there people up there? It looks like there are.
Are there people in the balcony? Yay. We can't see you in the balcony, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Hey.
Thank you. Amazing. I mean, I think that, you know, Afropunk is clearly the winner of the co-opted punk movement. I mean, listen. I know we could arm wrestle.
We had Gucci queercore Gucci shoes. That's pretty.
Yeah, and there was a Riot Grrrl on that '90s show. I'm sure you were proud about that.
What? The Riot Grrrl and Roseanne?
No, okay.
Riot Grrrl and Roseanne, that was hilarious. There's a
that was hilarious,
Barbie
yeah.
that I saw at Target wearing a girl power t-shirt. I was like, I made it.
Yeah, I made it.
Finally, I could tell my parents.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Afropunk, the global brand, is now owned by a billionaire. So
You win.
Like it's copyright. It's a copyright.
it's trademarked and owned. I mean, we all, well, you and I both have trademark stories, but like, you know, see, I'm gonna say this, like very early on, I saw what happened to Riot Grrrl. I saw what happened to Straight Edge. I know that there was like embarrassment from the people who, I mean, Ian's talked about like the moments where it's like, oh God, those dudes like are carving X's in people's heads, and there's things that, when I was 25 and Afropunk came out, I was like, I don't want that to happen to Afropunk. So I trademarked it so that I could like hold it, right? Not knowing that I'm like, oh, I'm creating a brand, And eventually I lost that trademark, and then, it's a long story, but yeah, so the owner of Afropunk currently is a billionaire. They're the people who do the Afropunk Festival. It has zero things to do with anything punk. Did it accomplish its mission statement of like expanding notions of blackness, of creating a third lane? I mean, if we remember the early 2000s of what you could be as a Black American, felt very limiting. You could be a thug, or you could be a like boho kind of neo soul person. So like, when I see Afropunk Fest and I see like, Black queer people shaking their ass and having a great time, it's like I can't be mad at that. But I'm dealing with the understanding of the Black punks, many of whom were queer or are queer, who that was built on and were stomped out in order to get there, And when people say that billionaires, you can't become a billionaire without like thoroughly fucking people over, that is absolutely true, So even in a cool, Black, funky space, there is a litany of lawsuits. If you Google, Afropunk V, you'll find unlimited lawsuits of artists who were ripped off and whatever along the lines. So I'm not the only one. So I keep saying like, I luckily have this long bow of history, and I can see how the underground won in my view, but there's a lot of pain getting there.
I think punk became co-opted in general. I mean, not just queercore, not just Afropunk. I remember I used to have like 23 piercings above the waist, and I was the first person and one of the first people in Toronto, like from my age group, to get tattoos. There was only 2 tattoo shops in Toronto in the 80s. One was run by a biker chick, and one was run by a neo-Nazi skinhead, and you had to choose one or the other, and I did both, and got my first tattoos, and he was playing like Screwdriver on his boombox while I was getting my tattoo, and so, but then I had this epiphany where one day later in the late 80s, early 90s, I had all these piercings, and I went to my supermarket, and I saw in front of me in the lineup at the supermarket a grandma with her 2 grandkids, and she had a nose ring and like a lip piercing, and I just went home and took all my piercings out and never put another one in, and I said, punk had that aspect of punk, that kind of like statement, that kind of like radical statement, had its moment, It had this radical impact at the time. And when I first went to Toronto and I saw somebody with a big mohawk when I was a kid, when I was 18 or whatever, I was like, wow, that's like, they're like from another planet. It's absolutely so unconventional and kind of
but
like...
now like children get mohawks.
And so at a certain point you have to just... there was a time in the punk movement where people were consciously divesting themselves of all those signifiers because they no longer had the radical impact that they once had, and they started wearing flannel shirts and like, docks or whatever.
I think the perfect example that we could all kind of see is like skateboarding in the Olympics.
Oh my
it's
God.
like
It's such a great example, like Leo Baker. I don't know if people know Leo Baker. He's a trans punk skateboarder. He can't even compete because he's trans. You
yes.
know.
So it's like if you see,
What about the break dancer?
yeah, it's like when you see the real.
She was punk. She was
Yeah.
punk. That white break dancer. She was punk.
When you see like when you've been part of real skateboard culture, you know what it is, right? And it's like you said, when you see it on the Olympics, it's like that ain't it. It's like they're doing really amazing, like, holy shit, I can't believe you can flip the board like that. But it's like the soul has been stripped out of it. So there's a whole, I mean, I don't know if there's any skaters in the house, but a lot of the critique that I hear.
One.
The critique that I hear is that like skateboarding was better when it was a crime. Skateboarding is a culture, not a sport.
Well, what's interesting? Do you follow Unity Queer Skateboarding? Yeah. Oh my God, Unity Queer Skateboarding is run by this guy named Jeff Chung. He's incredible. He's a musician out of the Bay Area, and they have I mean, the thing about skateboarding at the Olympics that sucks is it's all about mastery, right? And I used to skate when I was young, and part of skateboarding is about being a fucking mess, and being rebellious and being where you're not supposed to be and shredding, and much like punk. And so what's cool is Unity is taking all of that shit and making it queer and trans and putting it on its head. And like they'll do tricks like this trans girl Marby will lay on her tummy and slide down like on her fucking skateboard like stairs. Like they'll do stupid shit on purpose to make the mastery bros mad.
I want to add about co-opting too. I mean, we're in Los Angeles. It's like what's been happening, especially in the Latino community, the brown community, with immigration. Who's going to co-opt? What do you co-opt in? What can you co-opt? Our anger? I mean, how do you market that? Is it marketable? Is it scary? And I think, in all the scenes we're in, I think we just have to stay true to it because the true essence of it is rebellion. And it is something that scares people. And the millionaires can't buy the true essence of that. And I think, just stick to it. It's like Chicago, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, all these places. There's so much happening and there's so much that needs to happen, right? And I just feel like, there will be things that get sort of packaged and try to, brand it and sell it to people. But then there's the core of it that they can't even begin to touch, right? So.
Well, I mean, go ahead. I think that the capitalist weapon against underground political movements, which punk is by flattening it and making it and sanitizing it. And when you can get your girl power shirt or your rainbow flag at Target, it takes the scariness out of it. But then when shit gets real and you really need it to mean something, then they abandon it, And we need to stick with the. We need
it's like people wear Che Guevara T-shirts, and you ask them who it is, and they don't know, like who that's the ultimate.
But the thing, and also, is that we're bigger than these leaders. The movement is bigger than like we can't just let the commercialization of things stop the movement, and that's up to us to see through.
Yeah, but also, I mean, like, I was somebody who lived in the suburbs, and I didn't have access to punk rock really, and, like, so I saw it on TV. And, like, I just want to acknowledge that, like, when I went to high school, I remember being in a department store, like Meyer and Frank or Nordstrom or whatever, and I saw this kid from my school with his mom, and she was buying him a T-shirt that said, "Shut up, bitch." And it was actually a really popular thing in the late 80s, this t-shirt. Now it's Who Ate All the Pussy, which I actually think is hilarious, but, because who did eat it? But, like, is there just one person who ate it all? But anyway, sorry. But so when I see, like, a little girl wearing a girl power shirt, I'm like, I'm so glad that she's not standing next to this kid wearing a shut up bitch t-shirt anymore, and that that's not acceptable. And, like, I feel like part of the thing, like, I felt really shitty when Taco Bell did this thing where they, on their tray liners, they made it look like zines, and it was like, instead of Revolution Girl Style Now, it was like Revolution Taco Style Now or something. And that was, to me, the breaking point. Like, I was like, oh, fuck, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, whoa. And like, I was like having a hard time, you know, I was living in the garage at Carrie Brownstein's house. Like, and I was like having a hard time having money to just like buy food. And I was like, what the fuck? But then as I have matured and things have come around, I'm really lucky I have a name that's associated with these bands, so I can come here and I can speak to people, or I can do lectures. I'm so lucky that I have like the financial ability to do things. I'm so lucky of all this stuff. And also the way that it has trickled down, like Spice Girls or what have you, I would rather that little girls were listening. I mean, I fucking can't stand Spice Girls, but I've met little girls who were like, it changed their lives and it made them feel like they prioritizing their friendships over heterosexual relationships was okay. And so I'd rather that they're listening to that than Blood Sugar Sex Magic by rapist Anthony Kiedis. So I feel like of two minds about it. Like, I feel like, also, I think what Martine said is exactly what got me through the Taco Bell tray liner situation, was that I was like, oh, I'm an artist, I'll just keep making art. Like, and not stopping it. I was like, it doesn't matter, they can rip us off as much as they want, but they're stupid and they have to steal ideas from other people, but we're just gonna keep making stuff and be generative and change what we make. And also, we can steal from the mainstream as much as they can steal from us. Like, I love pop music. I love trying to kind of distort and fuck with pop music to see how far it can expand. And that's okay. You know, and I just feel like there has to be a two-way street about it, and that I don't wanna get, in the 90s, one of the really bad downfalls of Riot Grrrl was it was way easier for predominantly white middle-class young women who were involved in the movement to get all hung up on being co-opted and misquoted and all that kind of shit. And in the end, what we needed to be talking about was classism and racism and homophobia, and if this was really a movement, what were we gonna do to not have it just be the same kind of faces and the same kind of voices? And instead of doing that, we all got hung up on talking about, oh, USA Today wrote this fucking thing. It's like, it's just not important. And like what you were saying, like, you know, people are being fucking kidnapped off the streets. I don't fucking care if somebody steals a line out of one of my songs and uses it in a fucking commercial. It just isn't a big fucking deal to me. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just gets back to me with the whole thing of when I was in high school and people would call girls posers. Or like what you said, like, oh, you know, you're wearing a whole shirt, tell me the 3 songs by Hole or whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter. It just ends up in some kind of punk purity politics, you know? And like, that's the thing that scares me about having a conversations about co-optation, is that there's also kids who don't have access to the internet, it's different, but who don't have access to some stuff, and they find it through some stupid shirt at the mall, and then they type it in the computer, and then they maybe learn more about like music that we've made or zines we've made or films that we've made, and I'm okay with the man leading people into our work.
Totally. It reminds me, like, within kind of, yes. Like in the trans community that we've all been debating to our own death, the issues of trans visibility. And there's this really incredible artist and writer named Tourmaline, and she wrote this great book called Trapdoors. And the opening line to Trapdoors is trans visibility is a trapdoor, essentially. And it's like, it's a trap, but it also takes you somewhere new, right? And it's like, it's the same with the accessibility to punk, and to subculture, right? It's like all of these things. I do want to move into some questions from the audience.
Can you guys handle the questions for a minute? Because I have to pee, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Should we all chant Bruce until he comes back? Bruce, Bruce, Bruce. So this is actually a really great question. What can punk movements of the past teach us about resisting and reacting to our current political moment in the United States? Great question.
I personally think there's a lot of punk history that has been sort of lost, especially I love collecting flyers, and I love when I find a flyer that was for some cause or a benefit show, because it kind of really, I feel connected to that because I've played so many benefit shows, I've organized benefit shows, and, you know, done all this stuff, and when I see it, we're like, I'm trying to think the flyer, the Zeros at Moody Park, is it? Moody Park in LA? Was there a Moody Park? Alice, are you here? Do you know?
She's here.
Yeah, well, there was this Zeros and Dills flyer. Okay, so everyone's got to go pee break.
Hour.
No, but I think like learning about that or hearing about, you know, Basque punk scenes where they hijacked a bus, the punks did, to all go to the show, or they would play at the prison and sneak prisoners out. Like, just stuff like that. And it's like these stories that you they get passed down, but I feel like there's not enough documentation about that.
Totally. Bruce,
he brought the bottle. And there's, not enough documentation about that. And I feel like there's so many great things that happen in punk where people were doing things. I know Alice was also involved with a benefit show for Central America, and like she was getting ready to, do that stuff. And I don't know, there's just a lot. I think there's so much, but it doesn't get highlighted. It's like I'm tired of hearing about the same old bands all the time, and I'm like, there's so many interesting things that happened in punk that I feel get sort of pushed to the side. Look up a band, Alien Nation, from the UK. They were they're just great. They have this great sort of perspective as immigrants living in England and being a punk band. But I mean, I don't know. First generation illegal immigrants, second generation juvenile delinquents. That's some of the lyrics. It's just like fucking amazing. And I could relate to that. I think that's amazing. It's just great. But I don't think there's enough documentation, basically. Yeah.
I think punk for right now, I'm really excited to make some new stuff and go on tour, because I feel like in real life stuff is really, really important, and encouraging I go down an Instagram hole, and then I have to delete it, and then I have to put it back on because I have to check out some new band or whatever. But I feel like encouraging in person, like this event, going to a punk show, that yes, let's see each other at the protest, but also let's see each other having fun and dancing and having our bodies near each other in the same room. I feel like it reminds us of why we want to fight, because we can go out, we can have a good time, we can listen to these bands that we really care about, and we can table at this stuff, we can get people involved in their local political organizations, because a lot of people, me included, sometimes feel just totally overwhelmed, and I'm like, how do I get involved? How do I plug in? Where should I plug in? What should I most be doing? Because there's so many millions of things happening. And so I've sort of picked the things that are important to me, and I'm working on those 2-3 things. And I don't let the rest of it go, but trying to encourage us to focus, and be involved locally. So I think shows are a great place for people to meet and reconnect and get out of their fucking houses being depressed.
Give me 1 second, everyone. One quick thing. If anybody, I said the wrong band name. It's not Alien Nation. It's Alien Culture with a K. Okay, so if you want to look them up, I just had to make that correction. I hate when my brain does that.
What was the question?
How is the bathroom?
They have it piped in, so I was listening in the bathroom. But
The question was,
Yeah.
are there any lessons from punk that people can use to resist what's happening in the world right now?
oh yeah, I mean, for me, punk is an ethos, right? It's like it's a state of mind. So, you know, even though I kind of felt like I left the punk scene at a certain point, literally, like I wasn't going to, you know, Toronto got very bourgeoisification and gentrification, and there was no more punk venues left anymore like there was in the 80s, where there was like 5 or 7 dedicated punk venues in the 80s where we go once a week to see a punk band that was coming through internationally. And you know, Toronto got so stupidly expensive, and there was no place. There's still some venues, but you know, you just kind of like have to, you know, maintain the spirit of what made you a punk in the first place, and just continue it in whatever work you're doing. So I, you know, just continued as a filmmaker, and even though I make films that might not be outwardly punk, like they don't have the signifiers of punk, they're not about, you know, people with mohawks or skinheads or whatever anymore, they still have that kind of anarchist impulse, that kind of aggro, shock value kind of, you know, essence that I just continue on with my work, whatever I'm doing, and so in that sense, I'll always be a punk, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, you know, piggybacking on what Bruce is saying here, it's like most of the punks that I know who are like over 40, who are still like actively, whether they're actively going to shows or not, a lot of people like stand in the back and then they just go out the back door and they never come, you know, like, I have so many friends who are just like, in their everyday lives are political. And in some ways, like Mo, who's the protagonist I was talking about earlier in Afropunk, he's literally the president of the Working Families Party, you know? So it's like those politics translate into life outside of the venue. And I, you know, the work that I do, it's like I don't even have, even if I'm writing fiction, it's still like infused with these politics because it's just who I am, and I got that through this scene, you know, through these bands. So, you know, we can give ideas of like direct action, but I also think it's just like you see it, you know. I go every time I go to a protest downtown, I can't help but spot the punks, you know. It's like they see the patches, you see the like, and it's just like it's a lot, you know, like it's a lot.
Totally.
I just want to add another thing too. As an older punk, like, there's so many kids doing stuff. I like, even from, like, I'm busy teaching. I'm a high school teacher, and it's like I love. Back in Chicago, like, my punk friends call me to like, Martin, can you make a flyer? I'm like, yeah. And I'd like sit up late and have a glass of wine, and I make a shit punk drawing, and then I send it to them, and it's you know, I'm doing that. I just did a bunch of flyers for shows that are happening in a couple weeks. I think even as an old punk, you can sort of just be supportive and do whatever you can to kind of support these kids and doing stuff, and they feel like, damn, somebody from the older scene is paying attention to what we're doing and helping us out in some way. I think there's something really powerful about that we shouldn't lose. And I you know, right now I'm not really playing in much, you know, but it's like anything I can do. You want me to make a flyer? I'll make a flyer. You need some of my photography? I'll get you some photos, whatever, you know? So, I don't know. That's just a side note.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just remembered, like, I just got asked if a kid who's doing a Latino punk show, or Latino Punk Fest, asked if they could show Afropunk as a fundraiser, and I'm like, yeah, Like, of course. You know, it's like those kind of things are just no-brainers, you know?
And Kathleen, you said in your book, you know, what punk also taught us was the DIY, and we were everything. Like when we made fanzines and bands, we did everything. We did desktop publishing. We did our own distribution. We did our own, you know, we were all photographers. We were all writers. We wrote manifestos. We became polymaths, you know, and we did all this stuff. And that stays with you. I mean, that was the spirit of punk too. Is just to do everything yourself and you know, be you know, diverse in what you in how you approach everything, you know.
Well, I hate to end this panel because it's so incredible, but we have run out of time. We had so many more questions. I'll end with one very quick question from Vashina Turner from the legendary Fatty Cakes and the Puff Pastries. She asks, in one word, what's something that's bringing you joy?
One word?
I'll get back.
One sentence.
I'll get back to you on that one. No.
I'll start. There's Oblivion. There's a punk venue in Highland Park, 5 days a week. They have shows. It could fit maybe 60 people, and it just excites me to drive by there every day and just see kids outside and like, yeah, you know, I think people think like, oh, punk's dead, and it's like, no, you just aren't paying attention.
Totally.
That was more than one word.
Oblivion. I wouldn't explain it.
I know.
Like, oh,
I'm
what?
just teasing you, James. I would say right now what's bringing me joy is being next to Martine, because our bands played together in the 90s, and I remember feeling so, relating to you so much and what you were doing, and feeling very lonely doing what I was doing, and then seeing you on stage and being like, I can do this. Like, that you were really somebody who I looked to in bad times, and I was like, well, he's out there doing it. I can keep doing it. So for me, the joy is right now that we get to hang out at, you know, this nice college, and that y'all came out and like you care enough to like listen to us talk, and it's really special for me.
For me, I have to say, just being here, I'm from Canada, and now to come down to the States is always like a challenge. And I'm always nervous at the border. I think they're going to check my social media, and to have like a conference like this that's so well attended about punk and about something subversive that can still happen is something to be joyful and thankful about, you know.
Yo quiero a Los Angeles, so I'm loving here. I get a lot of love in Los Angeles, and I'm just happy to be here. I'm thrilled. I love it. Thank you. I look forward to hanging out with people outside.
Yes, thank you all so much. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you again to Daria, who is retiring. Let's give it up for Daria. 20 years of Visions and Voices, absolutely incredible. Thank you all so much. We'll dance with you out in the courtyard. Thank you.